So what I want to talk about issue that's in the news. It's very personal for me because I've personally experienced not in this company but in in the industry we could say similar situations and it involves Costa Coffee, which is a major coffee shop brand company in the UK, founded in 1971. And some of the abuses that have allegedly been going on there. I was disgusted when I read the report, but not overly surprised because it's there's been a few whistleblowing incidents like this of unethical behaviour going on at big companies. There was one in London a while back, which I touched on, a Mexican restaurant chain. I think it was called Wafaya or something like that. I made a video about it. Forget the exact name now, but that caused a big backlash. Um, Labour rights is very much on my mind right now because I'm watching this film. It's an independent film about the great Mexican American labor organizer Cesar Chavez, starring Michael Pena. So the issue is very much on my mind. I'm going to read out. I'm not going to read out the whole BBC report. It's quite long, but I'm going to read out the first few paragraphs to kind of give you the gist of this issue. Costa Coffee workers have made numerous claims alleging poor working conditions across 29 franchise stores. The BBC has spoken to 26 employees of Costa Coffee franchise stores managed by Gold X Essex Investments Limited and Bristol, that's Bristol, not Bristol, the city, Bristol Investments Limited. Complaints include managers' alleged refusal to pay for sickness or annual leave, working outside of contracted hours, and the retention of tips. That bit caught my attention. I'll explain why in a minute. A Costa Coffee spokeswoman said an independent audit had been launched. Given the serious nature of the allegations, we have today informed all of our individual franchise partners that we will be launching an independent audit into the legal and ethical compliance of their operations, including employment matters, she said on Thursday. The latest allegations surfaced after the BBC reported that staff at Costa stores managed by Cafil Khan's Gold X Essex Investments Limited were being charged a minimum of £200 for their own training. Um, a previous complaint against the Costa franchise partner by ex-employee Daniel Guyori for withholding wages was upheld in court in the claimant's favour. Now, like I say, the report's quite lengthy. I'll put a link to it as I always do with these things, so you can read for yourself. I think the problem here is in these greedy franchises that buy into big companies. Nevertheless, Costa Coffee is the face of the company, so the onus is entirely on them. And if they're not scrutinizing what's going on, now they're doing the right thing. They've launched this independent audit, but I wonder would that happen without whistleblowers, without brave employees coming forward and talking of their experiences? Withholding pay for training is disgusting, in my opinion, because training is just a fundamental part of a job. It's if you're accepted to a job, training comes with that. So the idea that you're paid less or payment is withheld for a training period strikes me as sheer greed. You know, Costa Coffee is a company that generates millions every year, probably has an overall turnover, cumulatively speaking, in the billions. So they've got stores across the UK. I don't know how many stores, but it would certainly be probably in the low hundreds. So it's a major company. And, you know, this is, the report goes on to say a lot of shocking things. I'm going to put a link to this. But I think a big problem here lies in this franchising system whereby these third parties can get in and sounds like they behave like little mini dictatorships. I mean, holding back pay for training is a disgrace, but there's been cases of real abuse of power. For example, in one incident, a manager, and this isn't just junior staff, even managers have suffered from this. In one case, a manager, according to the report, was 5 minutes late and she got deducted wages for that. 5 minutes late. Um, there are all examples where wages were deducted because supposedly machines hadn't been cleaned properly. Um, you know, this really resonates with me because I have some very unpleasant personal experiences. I once worked in an Italian restaurant. Now, that was an independent restaurant. It wasn't a big multinational, but they done precisely that. They withheld wages on the grounds, in my case, actually wages, on the grounds that tables hadn't been wiped properly. Now, and they also withheld tips. Now, this is kind of a contradiction because in the UK, giving tips is not an obligation in most places. So if a customer gives tips, it's because they're happy with the service. And in this case, they came up with this excuse that tables hadn't been wiped properly, therefore they withheld the tips and they underpaid the wages as well. At the time, I was only 17, and frankly, I didn't have the self confidence to defend myself. I think this is a David and Goliath situation because a staff member that does speak up for themselves, um, that's a really difficult situation to be in because, on one hand, they want to defend themselves from being exploited and abused. On the other hand, obviously, that's going to create a negative environment if they're complaining about those who have more power than them. Because then, if they want to continue working in that job, oh, they're the ones that made the complaint. But there is certain fundamental. Well, I'm going to outline some of the allegations made here. Other fines outlined in the contracts were for used uniform that was damaged when returned to the employer, excessive waste, and till discrepancies. Um, well, till discrepancies, okay, I'll give them that. If if there's any signs that an employee's stealing wages, that's different. But that's just common sense. But wait here, some of these. Opening a store late. All employees, this is according to these franchise partners in their contract. All employees who are in the rota to open a store need to begin work at 6:15 a.m. in order to open the store on time at 6:30 a.m. If at any time a store is opened after 6:30 a.m., the company reserves the right to fine the employees responsible on duty £150 if the store is slightly late opening. £150. Till shortages. In any circumstance where the till is short upon cashing up at the close of the business day, the company reserves the right to deduct the variance from the responsible employee's salary. The company will hold each employee working on the till responsible for any shortage on a daily basis. It is important that each employee, when working on the till, use their own till card to avoid any confusion. Now, I understand that to an extent. Obviously, if you have till discrepancies, that could indicate maybe someone's having a five-finger discount. So fair enough, there may be an issue there. But if it's a case of a few pennies are missing here and there, there could be a range of reasons for that. There could be maybe people have counted wrong. There could be issues like that. And in my case, I would suggest that would be a case of interviewing the employees responsible, trying to find out what's happened. But draconian measures when the details aren't clear seems harsh. Excessive wastage, and this is applicable to managers, assistant managers. It is the responsibility of the assistant manager and the manager of the store to ensure that the correct amount of ordering is carried out. If a store is incurring excessive wastage costs on a regular basis, the company reserves the right to deduct these costs under the responsible managers, assistant managers. As a non-manager, it is your responsibility to support your line managers in ensuring this procedure is carried through. Deliveries. If Costa is unable to deliver stock due to a lack of access to the store caused by negligence by any employee, the company reserves the right to deduct the redelivery charge of £150 from the responsible employee's salary. Maintenance and cleanliness of the store's equipment. All display fridges must be cleaned out thoroughly once a month. Well, that's just common sense. Spot checks will be carried out ad hoc by Bristol Investments. If an engineer is called out and the diagnosis of the breakdown is due to the fridge not being cleaned out regularly, this includes the filters, the manager and assistant manager will face a fine of £150. As a non-manager, it is your responsibility to support your line managers in ensuring this procedure is carried through. Non-return of full staff uniform. On your final day with the company, you must return all company property, including all your uniform, including apron, shirts, and badges. By not meeting this requirement, a penalty fee to cover costs of £75 will be deducted from your final pay. Right, let me just give a bit of feedback on some of that. Some of that I think is okay, fair enough. The uniform thing, if you lose the uniform, well, that's your responsibility. Um, but the store thing strikes me as very draconian, fining people £150 if it's opening a few minutes late. I mean, is any customer going to be so inconvenienced if it opens 5 minutes later? That strikes me as very draconian. Um, and there seems to be a lot of punitive punishment for relatively minor things. Some of that, like I say, discrepancies on the till. If they're big discrepancies, fair enough. That might be someone helping themselves to cash, and that's common sense would dictate that needs to be investigated. But what I have a problem with is this sweeping draconian punishments without seemingly investigations. I mean, the report says there's deducted holiday pay. Um, And well, I'll put a link to the full report. I'm not going to read it out paragraph by paragraph, but suffice to say, there is enough there to, indicate that people are basically being treated in a very degrading way. Now, in my own personal experience, like I say, at that restaurant, it was very soul destroying. I always tried my level best. I'm not going to claim I was the best waiter in the world, but I tried my level best, and certainly there was nothing that warranted the sort of draconian measures they took. And it was a very underhand sort of way. They didn't even shout. The managers came in one day very calmly, and actually it may have been the owners, and just said, "Oh well, we're sorry that you've had the wage reductions or the tips taken away, but we need to maintain responsibility," or something along those lines. And I was flabbergasted. I didn't even know about this. It took the chef telling us what had actually happened because the managers were too cowardly to say it themselves. Um, I mean, when at the time I was on minimum wage, that wasn't even being paid properly, and then they took away the tips. So, my own personal experience, I would certainly think carefully about working for Costa Coffee when their franchise partners instill such draconian measures, for example, for a store opening date. I mean, if that's how they treat managers, how are they going to treat more junior staff? It's this sort of Dickensian draconian measures that they take is really problematic. It's sheer exploitation, treating people like dirt and finding greedy ways to take away wages. This is the CEO of Costas, and these franchise partners are not going to be, ever worried about money. It's fine for them, but to have a situation where staff are being bullied in this way over the most trivial of things, financially bullied, having £150 is a lot of money if you're in a job like this. It's not a small thing. That is a lot of money. And the uniform thing, like I say, fair enough. But deducting £150 because the store is open late, taking away wages for training, that is absolutely, frankly, disgusting. I did contact Costa to to put to them that this is being reported and what's their answer to it. It's good that there's been an independent investigation. There's a few things about this. Firstly, it shows the importance of a free media. Without a free media, this sort of greed and exploitation can't be reported on. It shows the importance of whistleblowers because without staff members coming forward, it would just continue. But the sad reality is, many young people, in particular, don't have the confidence to defend themselves, and they may not even know what their legal rights are. So it comes down to greedy people at the very top, and it's absolutely disgusting. I'm not going to say I'm going to totally boycott Costas. There's two in my city, and I'm not going to make that commitment because it's maybe I should, but I think this needs to be really reviewed, and it's a disgrace. But I think actually it's riving the industry. I don't think it's just Costas. I think it's these greedy franchise partners. That system really, really needs to be scrutinized, and certain people really need to be facing the heat. Kafil Khan, for a start, who manages Gold X Essex Investments Limited, which is the major franchise partner, he needs to be put on the spot. Um, Exploitation is rife in the catering industry. You get it a lot in restaurants, just and in other companies. In Amazon, we know the terrible reports that have come from Amazon. It's just this is the real ugly side of capitalism, where you get this sort of exploitation, and you don't need to be. a fiery Marxist to see it. It's just wrong, period. You know, anyone who's ever worked in an environment where you feel that you're being degraded in that way, where you're being punished punitively for such minor things, it's really soul destroying. So it's right that Costa Coffee is facing the heat because only by this sort of attention are they going to do anything about it. Okay, it may not be the Costa CEO that's responsible directly for this. It may be the franchise partners taking it on themselves, but it is Costa's responsibility because they've partnered with these people to be accountable. So in that sense, they are responsible.